Serious. Redditors who have lived in a haunted house, what are your most unexplainable paranormal experiences? In 2012, my stepfather overdosed on heroin and dropped dead in the hallway in his condo apartment. My mum had to move out shortly after since they were already behind on mortgage bills. A few months later, my lease went up and I was barely making ends meet and couldn't find a new roommate. My mum offered me the key to the condo apartment to squat for a few months until I saved up enough for my own apartment. I took the offer and moved into the condo apartment. After a month or so, I was asleep in the living room and I had this dream of him standing in the hallway facing the living room. He was looking at me and smiling, laughing. He even made a stupid joke and everything. It wasn't disturbing at all, just bittersweet. Then I suddenly woke when I felt some pressure stroking down my head and back. There was nothing around me and it tripped me the hell out. As a skeptical person that doesn't believe in the paranormal, it has to be some kind of sensory hallucination. It was still nice to see him in my dream once again though. Made me tear up typing this. Rest in peace, Darren. Mildly interesting fact. He dropped dead on July 13th in 2012. On a Friday the 13th. Moved from the US to the UK and our parents bought an old beat-up house. It still had lead pipes for the water. Nightmare all on its own. Anyway, work proceeded on the house whilst we lived there. We started seeing bright lights in the corners of rooms at night. Footsteps on floorboards, the house had carpet. I was about 6 at the time and started getting woken up in the night by a little girl who would dance on my chest of drawers for me. I was frickin' terrified. My mum just fobbed it off as me dreaming. Workmen complained of strange things happening like tools being moved and odd feeling like being watched. After about a year of this, my eldest sister's friend stayed overnight. She woke the whole house up screaming, saying a little girl had been in her room. She had apparently pulled her from the bed. The friend left the house and refused to ever come back. Mum decided she might need to do something about it and got some advice. He suggested my mum and the whole family should treat the presences as part of the family. So when we got home we shout, "Hi, we're home, did you have a good day?" Over time the house settled and we didn't get any more trouble. We also found out a little girl did die in the house of asthma. My parents still live there and it is a beautiful homely place now. I live in a house built in the 1800s. It survived the 2 world wars and it's seen some shit, I imagine. One of the previous owners had 2 sons who both committed suicide. A lot of strange stuff happens. The animals. Dog and parrots will wake up from their naps and follow something with their heads, just as they would follow me if I walk around. Also, before I switched rooms in the house, my brother had a room and he refused to sleep there as he would hear voices. He slept with my parents. He was a child until the day he got my old room and, since then, has slept in that room without problems. There's also a whole floor we don't use and I sleep in the attic and I pass through that floor to get to my attic. Weird explanation, but it's a weird house and I have a motion activated light there that goes on as I'm walking the stairs to that unused floor. It would also switch on in the middle of the night while nobody is walking under the motion detector. Also, there's cold spots. I lived in a house that seemed to be haunted by doppelgangers. Every event that happened never involved some mysterious figure, but a known person being in a place where they should not have been. Here are a few examples. I was a teenager at the time, and I was instant messaging my GF at the time with my webcam turned on. I had the viewer up so that I could see myself in the webcam. Behind me, there was the stairs leading up. Left of camera view and the entrance to the living room. Right of camera view. My younger sister would typically fall asleep every night on the couch in front of the TV and make her way up to bed in the middle of the night. At one point in my webcam view, I saw my sister leave the living room and go up the stairs. The thing that struck me as odd was that I didn't hear anything. It was an older Victorian house, so the wooden floor and stairs were loud AF. Without saying anything to my girlfriend, I got up and looked into the living room and there was my sister passed out on the couch. I sat back down and asked my girlfriend if she had seen anything in my camera. She said, "Yeah, I just saw your sister go upstairs." My family was all getting ready to go somewhere. I was sitting in the car with my mom and we were waiting on my sister who was still in the house. After a bit she comes out and gets in the car and just looks at me like, "What the fuck?" I ask her what's wrong and she says that just before she walked out of the house she thought I was still inside, so she yelled up the stairs, "David, we're leaving." And apparently I yelled back, "Okay, I'll be down in a minute." My mom woke up to someone tapping her foot and she said someone was standing at the end of her bed too. Faded out after a couple seconds. She said it looked like me. I had an encounter where I woke up and felt like someone was under my covers laying up against me. When I said something, my blanket visibly deflated and I no longer felt anything. I include this with doppelgangers because though I didn't see what I felt under the blanket, it laid like my girlfriend would have laid against me. When I was 22 I was in the military and I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It still took like a year after the diagnosis to separate from the military, but I went home on leave for the holidays about a month after the diagnosis. Anyone that has insulin-dependent diabetes typically carries around some sort of kit. Mine is black zip-up pouch and it has a glucometer, insulin pen, needles, and alcohol pads. Right after I left home to head back from leave my mom texts me to ask if I'm missing my diabetic kit. I look and I'm not. She sends me a picture of a diabetic kit and asks if I know it. I've never seen this kit before in my life. Apparently, my sister went into her bedroom and discovered it outside of her window propped up like someone had set it there. Oh, also, her bedroom is on the second floor. Nobody else we know has diabetes. The lady who had 2 husbands die on her in the same house. That's the house my dad decides to buy. The first one hung himself from the rafters in the garage, and the second one fell ill and died in his bed in the basement. I lived in the basement room and often just felt like I was being watched all the time. The bedroom in the basement has a secret storage room behind a bookshelf with a locking latch. I would always wake up to find the door wide open. It happened so often that I would wake up cold and routinely go shut and lock the latch of the door in the middle of the night. For the longest time I thought it was my dad or stepbrothers messing with me, but it wasn't. My stepbrother now occupies that room and he says it still happens to him and that he's even seen it open on its own. There are no air vents or anything, so I've ruled out wind. Also in the garage, I always see light coming from under the door through the crack, only to open the door to pitch black. I've heard sounds coming from the garage, only to find saw blades clanging together and slightly rotating in their place on the whole storage wall. Didn't think anything of it at first, but when you find shit moving on more than one occasion, it makes you look over your shoulder at the rafters and wonder. I lived in a house for about 5 years that was haunted, but not in a malicious way. In a shitty roommate kind of way. I'd come home to the windows on the second floor being open when it was raining. To food containers being open in the fridge that I hadn't touched yet. The worst was that the ghost hated clocks. She hated them. I had antique cuckoo clocks that had worked for 50 years that would just stop. Brand new wall clocks that ate through batteries like it was candy. My watch ended up on the floor one morning, the crystal shattered, even though I knew I slept with it on. The one that pissed me off the most was that I got a brand new Kit Kat clock for Christmas. And the bitch threw it off the wall. I was cooking and out of corner of my eye saw the cat freaking fly. Turned around and it was across the kitchen. Broken. It was brand new. When I was around 9 to 10 years old, I remember waking up to see a large shadow stood at the foot of my bed. I was living with my dad at the time. He has a very large 5 floors, terrace house built in the 1800s. Every so often there would be an unexplainable event happen, such as footsteps when there's no one there or voices. On the night this happened, it was just my dad and I in the house. My sister was staying with my mum at the time. I woke up and noticed the door to my room was wide open. I normally sleep with it closed. I then became aware of a large, around 7 feet tall, shadow-like figure watching me from the end of the bed. When the figure noticed me it seemed to melt into the floor and the door to my room slammed shut. Understandably I was slightly traumatized by the whole experience. Asked my dad the next day if he was in my room and he denied any knowledge of the event. He's not the type of person that likes jokes. My uncle's house out on a very eastern part of New York was said to be haunted due to the family that used to own it in the 1800s decided not to give it to the stableman and sold it instead. He and the maid were said to have haunted the place. We always used to joke that you would hear people or things moving at night, but since the house is so old, we used to just laugh it off. My uncle's friend had her and her sister stay over the house one night and the friend noticed a maid bringing towels down the stairs when she woke. She saw the maid again, bringing what looked like a percolator down the stairs. She was so impressed by my uncle hiring staff. He is a neurologist in New York City, so he had a habit of spending a little bit extra. She went back to bed and woke up later downstairs to see my uncle and his friend just chatting. She asked where the maid went and she thought that the maid was cooking breakfast. My uncle had no idea what she was talking about and asked what she looked like. The sister explained and he laughed. Walked her to the living room and pointed to an old picture. She said that was the woman. My uncle replied, Yay, she has been dead for about 100 years. So I used to live in a big house. 6 bedrooms, 4 bath, basement, etc. by myself. I was there as a hiring perk and to look after the place for my boss who lived out of state but owned the home, one of those win-win situations. The first couple of months were fine, but when winter came I started hearing things coming from the second floor. I lived pretty much exclusively on the first floor. It started with little bumps and bangs coming from above, where I had my computer set up, and progressed to distinct footsteps coming and going across the second floor. I had been up to the second floor to check up on it from time to time, and I knew that there were unfinished areas up there. One place always stuck out, an unfinished room that was a sort of walk-in closet for one of the upstairs bedrooms. It was attached to the garage attic. Complete unlit. It was open when I went up to investigate the noises. I shut the door and locked it. 2 nights later, more noises. Footsteps leading from unfinished room to the bathroom. Then nothing. The worst part, the door. The door that led to the unfinished room would not stay closed or locked. I tried everything. Eventually I pushed the bed up against the door to keep it from opening. That seemed to work. A few months went by without the door coming open, but I would find it unlocked all the time. As time passed I would hear noises all over the house. Mostly footsteps, but the occasional thump with no explanation. I cannot explain how horrifying it is to hear little taps up and down the hall from the other side of a bathroom door during your morning shower. I eventually moved out, but another employee moved in to take my place. His stay there only lasted about a month. The story he told me is that he was shaving one morning before work and he heard a slam like someone dropped a heavy stack of books right outside his bedroom door, then heavy footsteps like someone running down the hall. He won't stay there anymore, and no one in the company will live in the house. I lived in an old haunted house in college. Things got so weird that everyone moved out except for me and one roommate. Here's a few. I woke up at 3 a.m. because my roommate's door kept opening and slamming shut. From bed, I yelled for him to stop, only to realize I was the only one home that weekend. As soon as I yelled, the slamming stopped, but the hippie beads I had hanging outside my closed door began to sway perfectly, yet violently, against the door frame for a half hour, while I debated if I should pop out my air condition unit and jump out of the window. I laid in the fetal position in bed till it stopped. I woke up at 3 a.m., alone again, hearing the Nintendo in the back porch playing loudly. I figured a drunk kid came in and started playing. I grabbed a bat and walked towards the back of the house as the music got louder and louder. As soon as I opened the door, it was completely quiet, mind you it was loud enough to wake me up. I had friends over and told them the house was haunted. No one believed me, so I asked the ghost to do anything to prove it was there. As soon as I asked, all the lights in the house began flickering for about a minute straight. This was the middle of the day, everyone witnessed it. Almost everyone who stayed at my house had sleep paralysis at least once in the house. Every time something spooky happened, the house would smell like old lady, flowery, strong perfume. This house had a door built into the flooring that led to the basement. We always had a rug covering it up so no one knew it was there. Things would constantly go missing in the house and turning up in the basement. This house had a coal chute from when it was heated by coal back in the day. Missing stuff would always be placed on the chute for us to come and get. Roommate had some issues. Once while playing video games late at night he saw mist kind of hovering from the kitchen then move into the bathroom. The bathroom had a trap door that led to the attic. That's where we figured the old lady ghost used to like to hang out. Roommate was up late. He went to go lock the doors and turn off lights. When he turned his back on the room and walked to the door, someone breathed into his ear. He thought it was me. I was sleeping. He turned around, pissed himself, and ran to his room. He was too afraid to come out and turn off lights and TV. Loud thumps in attic at all hours. For peace of mind, we told ourselves squirrels must have gotten in there. Voices would wake us up in the middle of the night. I spent many mornings on the front porch waiting for the sun to come up before I went back in the house. Coincidentally, I had a friend years later that rented from the same landlord. Same town, different house, where he and all of his roommates moved out because that house was also haunted. I didn't think it was too weird until he was telling me that when all of the weird stuff happened, it was accompanied by old lady flowery, stanky perfume. Also, a lot of people had sleep paralysis in that house as well. I grew up with a cat, Boots, who was just a year my junior. Boots was motivated only by food and spent his later years sleeping on my parents' bed until someone came home, then he'd jump off the bed with a thunk of his front and back paws hitting the ground and run to his food bowl to beg. He had to be put down when I was 18. My parents moved out of my childhood home during my first year of college. I went back a few times before it sold. Every time, I was certain I felt a cat's presence. Like, I'd hesitate my step because I was sure a cat just walked under my legs kind of thing. Also, upon walking in, I'd always hear a thunk-thunk, like boots jumping down to beg for food. My mom and I went back for the last day my family would ever be in that home, and I told her on the way what I'd experienced. To my surprise, she had the exact same feeling. When we walked into the house, thunk-thunk. We exchanged shocked glances and confirmed we both heard it. I went and sat in my empty room while my mom got the final things together, and while my eyes were closed I had to force myself to not pet a cat that I felt walk up to me because I knew logically he wasn't there. Before leaving, we stood in the hallway outside my parents' bedroom, hugged each other, and cried, saying bye to my first home. I said I thought Boots was still around and suggested we take his spirit to the new house. She agreed, so she called out, "Bootsy," from my parents' room. Thunk-thunk. We both heard it. I don't think he came with us. He never liked car rides. But I hope the owners since us have enjoyed their ghost kitty. He was a good boy. I used to live in an old big 5-bedroom house with 6 other people. My significant other and I shared one of the rooms. I saw a stranger in my room when I was in my 20s. It wasn't exactly visible, but I somewhat knew it was right there in the corner of the room. My significant other was next to me sleeping. While I had my eyes open, I knew it was there. So I closed my eyes. I tried to wish it away. I opened my eyes and it was now next to the bed, looking at me. I closed my eyes again and suddenly relief came. I opened my eyes, nothing there. I saw it once again at the stairs. It was only a brief moment this time, and then it was gone. I lived in one when I was a teen, along with my parents. Several instances come to mind. We were remodeling an old farmhouse and had been there a couple of months before witnessing anything. One day I was underneath my truck, which was supported by only a jack. Stupid, I know, I was in the middle of working on it, with no good reason to get out at that moment. Suddenly the overwhelming urge to get out from underneath overwhelmed me. No sooner than I got out, the truck fell to the ground, the jack had slipped. Freaked Dad out, he thought I was under it. When Mom got home, we mentioned it and she started crying, sobbing pretty hard. It turns out the previous owner died in the driveway, under a vehicle, in that spot. I would often see moving shadows and strangely hear music from the upstairs area. The windows of the old house were caulked shut and blackbirds would often get caught between the panes. We ended up replacing all the windows, but we had to break 3 inside panes to get them out. One of the more disturbing things happened when my mother was cooking breakfast. She turned away to get something out of the cabinet, and when she turned back around, all the forks set out were bent straight up. I grew up in a huge 17th century house. Today it has been completely remodeled on the inside. But while we lived there, it was still in the beautiful old style with art, ballroom, marble floor halls, statues. You get it? During my 9 years living there I found out the following things. It once was a brothel. It once was a plague hospital. It once was a normal hospital. It once was a morgue. During World War II it was a German SS post before half of it got shot to shit and killed about 20 Germans. Fun thing was, the mortar that did that fell in the place my room was at where the Sayers were having a meeting at the time they think. Napoleon slept there a couple of days, which is pretty cool. There were 3 families where multiple murders occurred inside the house. Here are my accounts of growing up there. As a kid I saw a lot of shadows, heard a lot of weird noises, the usual. My sister who lived on the 3D floor came down to my room a lot at night to stare at me, sleepwalking, and sometimes slept in my room and forgot about it the next night. The doors creaked and opened and closed on themselves a lot, which can happen in an old house due to draft. Now this is all stuff that any kid can imagine due to the suggestive state an old house can give a person. Nothing really scary. Also the alarm went off a lot during the night. Triggered by air? One time, my parents were in China for business. Me and my brother and sisters slept at other places because my parents were away for quite a time. I had to go to hockey practice, but I forgot some gear so me and my friend went to get it. The house was engulfed in darkness and very silent. As we walked out of my room, we heard footsteps in the attic. 2 of my siblings had their bedrooms there, so I thought one of them was at home. I shouted at them which made the footsteps stop. After 5 seconds or so we heard the footsteps coming closer to the stairs and actually setting foot on the very old wooden creaky steps. 1 step at a time. I actually felt a weight setting foot in front of me. Very strange. But I saw nothing. Nevertheless. We were 12 so we noped the fuck out of there. Outside, my friend had a total nervous breakdown because he saw some scary face form that looked like an alien to him. He never set foot in my house again. I credit it all to the creepiness of the house. But that one night with my friend still gives me the chills. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please drop a like, and to stay up to date with my latest videos, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking the button under this video.